He was a man who had built his life from nothing. Every achievement he had, every success he enjoyed was earned through years of hard work, long nights, and endless sacrifices. Today, he was a billionaire, living in a world of luxury, yet he had never forgotten the values his mother had taught him. She had raised him alone, guiding him with patience, love, and unwavering discipline. Her kindness and warmth shaped the man he had become, the man who now held a prominent place in the business world, but never let it distance him from the people he cared about. His mother was now elderly, but her presence was still commanding and comforting. She had a way of making everyone around her feel seen and valued. Even in her later years, she carried herself with grace, her smile capable of brightening the room instantly. Despite her age, she maintained her routines, her dignity, and her simple ways, never asking for anything extravagant. Her life had been simple, yet she was proud of the person her son had become. Their bond was unshakable, built on years of mutual respect and love. It was a relationship that he cherished deeply, a connection that remained untouched by his wealth or the world around him. When he met her, his fiancée seemed like the perfect complement to his life. She was young, beautiful, ambitious, and sophisticated, someone who could walk into a room and turn heads. She spoke confidently, laughed effortlessly, and seemed to understand the world of wealth and influence that he moved in. To him, she was not just a partner, but someone who could share in his life's successes and adventures. At first, everything seemed perfect. She respected his mother in public, offered kind words, and made efforts to seem charming and considerate. Their engagement was celebrated widely among friends, family, and even in social circles outside their immediate sphere. It was a glamorous affair filled with laughter, applause, and the sparkling lights of a life many only dreamed about. He was proud to have her by his side, imagining a future where they would grow together, travel together, and support one another. He often thought about the life they would build, imagining a home filled with joy, love, and laughter. The world outside saw them as a perfect couple, a pair whose life story seemed straight out of a fairy tale. But life is rarely as perfect as it appears on the surface. Small cracks began to show, subtle signs that something was amiss. She would make comments that seemed offhand, but carried a sharpness that only a careful ear could detect. At family gatherings, he noticed her rolling her eyes at his mother when she wasn't looking, a tiny smirk crossing her face when she thought no one noticed. He was busy with his work, so he dismissed these moments as quirks, telling himself he might be reading too much into them. But the people who worked closely with them, the staff who witnessed the interactions daily, began to notice tension. They whispered concerns quietly among themselves, unsure whether to speak up, fearing they might be seen as meddling. Despite the initial charm, the fiancé's impatience occasionally surfaced. It was subtle at first, small moments of dismissiveness when she thought the elderly mother did not hear. Sometimes it was in the tone, a slight edge in her voice, or the way she would sigh when asked a simple question. She seemed more interested in the material aspects of life, the gifts, the parties, the status, than in forming genuine connections. But these signs were easy to overlook, especially for someone who wanted to see the best in the people around him. He wanted to believe that she loved and respected his mother, that she could truly be a part of the family. And so, he ignored the small moments, choosing to focus on the grand gestures and the outward appearances. One evening, there was a family dinner in their home. It was meant to be a simple gathering, yet the air felt different. He noticed the way she interacted with his mother, the way her words sometimes carried a subtle sharpness that did not belong. She laughed too loudly at jokes that were unkind, glanced impatiently when his mother spoke, and offered smiles that felt forced. He watched quietly, uncertain whether to confront it or dismiss it as a momentary lapse. His mother, ever composed, maintained her warmth, but he could see a flicker of hurt in her eyes. It was brief, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to unsettle him. He felt a knot in his stomach, a growing sense that the perfect image he had held was not the full reality. After the dinner, when they were alone, he tried to talk to her casually about how the evening went. She laughed off the moments he mentioned, brushing them aside with charm and smooth words. She assured him she respected his mother and would never act otherwise. But deep inside, a seed of doubt began to grow. He had always trusted his instincts, and now they were whispering caution. There was a dissonance between the person she showed the world and the person he sensed in private moments. It was a subtle tension, one that he could not yet fully name, but it lingered, growing with every interaction. He found himself observing more closely. He paid attention to the way she interacted with others, not just his mother. There were moments when her laughter seemed hollow, her gestures calculated. It was not easy to accept. After all, he loved her, believed in her, and wanted to see her in the best light. But the more he watched, the more inconsistencies appeared. It was like a beautiful painting that, upon closer inspection, revealed cracks in the canvas, flaws hidden beneath layers of color. His mother remained as she always was, gracious, kind, and patient. She did not complain, did not point out flaws, but her presence was a constant reminder of the values he held dear. He realized that no wealth, no charm, no glamour could replace the integrity and love she embodied, and yet he struggled with the growing tension. He did not want to see the relationship crumble, did not want to believe that the person he loved could be capable of hurting someone so dear to him. The conflict within him was intense. His heart wanted to trust, but his mind whispered caution. In the midst of this, the fiancé continued to present a perfect facade in public. Friends, colleagues, and distant relatives saw a happy, loving couple. No one could see the quiet moments of tension, the subtle glances that spoke volumes, or the small acts of impatience that hinted at something deeper. It was a delicate balance, a duality that only he and a few observant staff could perceive. The outward perfection masked the underlying reality, making it harder to confront. The story of this family, their love, and the looming challenges was just beginning. The billionaire, despite his success, faced one of the most human struggles of all, the fear that someone he loved could betray the trust and respect that formed the foundation of his life. His mother, wise and loving, remained his anchor, while the fiancé's true nature was slowly revealing itself piece by piece. The tension built quietly, almost imperceptibly, yet it carried the weight of the choices that would soon define their lives. The stage was set for events that would shake the carefully constructed world of wealth, love, and trust, and nothing would ever be the same again. As the days passed, small incidents began to reveal the cracks in the seemingly perfect relationship. It was never one big event, but rather a series of little moments that created unease in the billionaire's mind. During casual visits to his mother's home, he noticed her fiancé becoming impatient with simple routines. Sometimes she would roll her eyes when asked to pass a dish or sigh loudly when small mistakes happened in the kitchen. It wasn't blatant, but there was a subtle sharpness in her tone that was hard to ignore. The billionaire tried to dismiss these moments at first. He told himself that everyone has a bad day, that stress can make people act differently, or that perhaps he was being too sensitive. But these moments kept coming, small and frequent, each one like a tiny drop that slowly filled a glass. Friends and staff who observed these interactions were concerned. Some whispered among themselves about her behavior, worried that it might be masking something deeper. But most hesitated to say anything directly to him, fearing that they might be wrong or accused of meddling. It became harder for him to ignore the tension. At social gatherings, he started noticing how she treated people outside the family. She was charming and polite when it suited her, but there were moments when her true impatience or irritation slipped through. He saw the way she would dismiss waiters, ignore assistants, or make cutting remarks disguised as jokes. It was not cruel in a dramatic way, but it carried a subtle disrespect that unsettled him. He began to wonder if she truly understood or respected the people who had been part of his life long before he met her. At home, the tension became more noticeable. One afternoon, the billionaire returned from a business trip earlier than expected. He found his fiancée in the living room, speaking to his mother in a tone that was unusually sharp. The words themselves were mild, but the way they were delivered carried a sting. His mother, ever calm, responded politely, but the billionaire could see a flicker of hurt in her eyes. He felt a mix of anger and disbelief. How could someone he cared for treat the person who had given him everything with such disregard? That evening, he tried to talk to her gently about her behavior. He explained that his mother had devoted her life to raising him, that she deserved respect and kindness. She smiled, assuring him that she was fine, that he was overthinking the situation, but he felt the words lacked sincerity. He could sense a defensiveness beneath her calm exterior, a subtle refusal to acknowledge the impact of her actions. He began to realize that this was not just about occasional impatience. It was about a pattern of behavior that reflected her true attitude toward people he cared about deeply. As the days went by, the billionaire started to pay closer attention to her interactions. He noticed the way she would make subtle jokes at his mother's expense when she thought no one was listening. She would comment on her age, her habits, or her slow pace, framing it as playful teasing but delivering it with a hint of malice. He also saw how she treated others outside the family, often with impatience or a sense of superiority. These observations created a growing unease in him. The person he had imagined as a loving partner seemed to have layers he had never seen before. He began reflecting on his past experiences and instincts. He realized that he had been blinded by charm and beauty, overlooking the small signs that hinted at her true nature. The way she laughed at jokes that were unkind, the subtle eye rolls, the impatience, it all added up. It was a lesson he wished he hadn't had to learn through experience, but the evidence was becoming too clear to ignore. He also recognized the importance of protecting his mother from harm, emotional or otherwise. She had given him a foundation of love and wisdom, and he was determined not to let anyone undermine that. Despite the growing tension, he struggled with conflicting emotions. He cared for his fiancée, had imagined a future with her and wanted to believe in her goodness. But the evidence was undeniable. The person he loved and trusted was showing a side that conflicted with the values he held dear. It was a painful realization, one that made him question his judgment and the future of their relationship. He began to see the importance of discernment, of observing not just words and gestures but the underlying intentions behind them. The mother, as always, remained composed. She noticed the subtle changes in interactions, but chose not to confront them directly. Her wisdom allowed her to remain calm while giving her son the space to navigate the situation. She knew that the truth would reveal itself in time, and she trusted that he would handle it with the integrity and care he had always demonstrated. Her quiet presence provided stability in the midst of growing uncertainty, a reminder of the values that had shaped his life. One afternoon, a minor incident escalated subtly, marking a turning point. The fiancé made a sarcastic remark about his mother's slow preparation of tea, laughing as if it were a joke. The billionaire, who had been observing quietly, felt a surge of protectiveness and anger. He realized that he could no longer ignore the pattern of behavior. It was not about a single incident. It was about consistent disrespect and lack of empathy. He understood that confronting this now was necessary, both for his mother's well-being and for his own peace of mind. He approached the situation thoughtfully. He began documenting the incidents in his mind, observing carefully and preparing for a conversation that would address the behavior directly. He wanted to give her a chance to acknowledge her actions and make amends, but he also knew he needed to be firm. It was not a matter of anger or punishment, but of setting boundaries and protecting the people he loved. During this time, he also reflected on his own values and expectations. He realized that wealth and luxury were not the most important aspects of life. Respect, empathy, and genuine connection mattered far more. He had built a successful career, but it was his relationships with loved ones that truly defined his life. Protecting those relationships meant being vigilant, observing carefully, and taking action when necessary. He could not allow charm or superficial appearances to overshadow fundamental respect and kindness. As he prepared to confront the situation, he felt a mix of emotions: sadness, disappointment, and resolve. He knew that this was a defining moment, one that would reveal the true character of the people around him. It was also a moment that would test his own judgment, his ability to act with integrity while managing complex emotions. He reflected on the importance of trust, the delicate balance between love and discernment, and the courage required to face uncomfortable truths. The tension continued to build, subtle yet palpable. He watched closely as the fiancé interacted with his mother and others, noting every gesture, every word, and every glance. The evidence of her behavior was undeniable, and he began to understand that he could no longer ignore it. The small cracks he had noticed over time had widened, forming clear signs of disrespect and lack of empathy. He knew that addressing the issue directly was the only way forward. Throughout this period, the mother remained a pillar of strength. She continued her daily routines, maintained her warmth, and offered quiet support to her son. Her calm demeanor and unwavering love reminded him of the values that mattered most. He drew strength from her example, realizing that protecting family and upholding integrity were more important than any relationship that lacked genuine respect. The stage was set for a confrontation that would reveal the truth. The billionaire understood that this was not about conflict or drama, but about clarity, honesty, and protecting what truly mattered. He was determined to act with courage and wisdom, guided by the lessons he had learned from his mother and his own life experiences. The events that followed would test the relationships, reveal true character, and set the course for the future. The story was building toward a moment of revelation, one that would change everything he thought he knew about the people around him. The morning started like any other day. The house was quiet, and the billionaire was preparing to leave for an important meeting. His mother was in the garden, watering her flowers like she always did, enjoying the peace and fresh air. The fiancée was in the living room, scrolling through her phone, barely paying attention to her surroundings. Everything looked ordinary, but that day would soon change the course of their lives. The billionaire had forgotten an important document at home and decided to return. When he walked through the hallway, he heard voices coming from the living room. He paused, not out of suspicion, but out of curiosity. What he heard next froze him in place. His fiancée's voice carried a tone he had never heard before, cold, mocking, and cruel. She was imitating his mother's soft voice, exaggerating her slow speech and laughing about how old-fashioned she was. Her words were sharp, filled with ridicule, and the laughter that followed pierced him deeper than he could have imagined. His mother sat quietly in her chair, her eyes lowered. She looked hurt but composed, as if she'd been enduring this quietly for a while. The fiancé didn't seem to notice or care about the pain her words were causing. She continued speaking with disdain, making jokes about the way the elderly woman dressed, how she moved slowly, and how she sometimes forgot small things. It wasn't just teasing. It was cruel, deliberate humiliation disguised as casual talk. For a moment, the billionaire couldn't move. His mind refused to accept what he was hearing. The woman he had planned to marry, the person he had trusted with his heart, was standing there mocking the one person who meant the most to him in the world. It felt as though the air had been sucked out of the room. Every illusion he had built about their relationship shattered in that instant. He stepped forward, and the sound of his footsteps made the fiancée freeze. She turned, startled, her face losing its color as she realized he had been standing there long enough to hear everything. The silence that followed was heavy. His mother looked up slowly, her eyes filled with sadness more than anger. The fiancé tried to recover, forcing a smile, but the damage was already done. He stood there for a long moment, his eyes fixed on her. The disappointment and disbelief in his gaze were stronger than any words he could say. She began to speak quickly, trying to explain herself, saying it was a joke, that she didn't mean any harm, that she and his mother were just playing around. But her voice trembled, betraying her fear and guilt. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned to his mother and gently helped her stand. She didn't say much, just placed her hand on his arm as if to remind him to stay calm. After making sure his mother was comfortable in her room, he returned to the living room. The atmosphere was tense. His fiancée was pacing, clearly nervous. She tried to speak first, but he raised his hand to stop her. His voice was calm, but there was a sharpness to it that left no room for excuses. He told her that he had heard everything, every word, every laugh. He asked her how she could show such disrespect to a woman who had done nothing but treat her with kindness. At first, she tried to deny it, then to soften it, saying that people sometimes joke without realizing how it sounds. But he wasn't convinced. He reminded her of the countless times she had rolled her eyes, the subtle insults and the cold behavior he had brushed off before. The pattern was too clear to ignore now. Her silence spoke louder than her words. For the first time, she seemed cornered, unable to charm her way out of the situation. She became defensive, accusing him of overreacting, saying that his mother was too sensitive and that she was just trying to lighten the mood. He couldn't believe the words coming from her mouth. It wasn't just her actions that disappointed him now. It was the complete lack of remorse, the unwillingness to acknowledge the pain she had caused. His heart felt heavy. He remembered the days when he had admired her grace, her confidence, her charm. Now all of it felt like a mask, something carefully crafted to win admiration, not affection. The woman he thought he loved seemed to vanish before his eyes, replaced by someone he barely recognized. The sparkle that had once drawn him in now felt empty and artificial. His mother later told him softly, Some people wear kindness like a dress. It looks good from a distance, but it's not part of who they are. Those words echoed in his mind long after the confrontation ended. He realized how easily he had been deceived by appearances, by surface-level gestures that hid deeper flaws. He wasn't angry in the loud, furious sense. It was a quieter, deeper pain that came from disappointment and betrayal. The days that followed were cold and distant. The fiancé tried to repair the situation, bringing flowers, cooking meals, and pretending that nothing serious had happened. But her efforts lacked sincerity. He saw through every attempt, every smile, every apology that didn't come from the heart. His mother, ever gracious, accepted the gestures politely but kept her distance. She didn't complain or speak ill of the young woman, but her silence said everything. The billionaire spent many sleepless nights reflecting on what had happened. He thought about his life, his success, and the kind of person he wanted to share it with. He realized that money and beauty meant nothing without respect and empathy. He remembered his mother's sacrifices, the long nights she had worked to ensure he had food, the way she had encouraged him to dream big even when life was hard. She had been his greatest supporter, his moral compass and his guiding light. Watching someone mock her so cruelly was unbearable. He began to distance himself emotionally. He became quieter, spending more time with his mother, avoiding long conversations with his fiancée. She noticed the change and grew anxious, sensing that the foundation of their relationship was crumbling. One evening she confronted him, demanding to know if he still wanted to marry her. He looked at her with calm sadness and told her that marriage was built on respect, not convenience or appearance. He said he couldn't spend his life with someone who could mock the person who had given him everything. She tried to cry, to plead, to promise that she would change. But it was too late. He had seen the truth, and once you see someone's true nature, it's impossible to unsee it. He didn't raise his voice or insult her. He simply told her that it was over. She packed her things the next day, leaving behind a house that suddenly felt peaceful again, though heavy with the weight of what had happened. After she left, the house seemed to breathe differently. There was silence, but it was a calm, comforting silence. His mother continued her daily routines, pretending nothing had happened, but he could see the relief in her eyes. They spent more time together, sharing quiet meals and simple conversations. Slowly, the warmth returned. The billionaire learned something profound through this painful experience. He realized that true character reveals itself not in public gestures but in private moments, how one treats the people who can offer nothing in return. His fiancée had treated his mother with disrespect when no one was watching, and that truth had been enough to show him everything he needed to know. He also realized how important it was to listen to the small signs, the quiet discomforts that often warn us of what's wrong. Love, he understood now, is not about charm or grand gestures. It's about kindness, patience, and genuine respect. Wealth could buy many things, but it could never buy true character. Months later, people still asked about the broken engagement, curious about what went wrong. He never spoke ill of her. He simply said that sometimes life reveals people's true nature in unexpected ways, and when it does, we have to choose peace over pretense. Those who knew him well admired his composure, his quiet strength, and the dignity with which he handled the situation. His mother, proud yet humble, often told him that this experience had only made him wiser. He agreed. It had been painful, but it had also opened his eyes to what truly mattered. He no longer chased perfection or appearance. Instead, he valued sincerity, compassion, and honesty, the qualities that had always guided his mother's life and, now, his own. What he had witnessed that day would never leave him, but it also freed him. It reminded him that true love and respect cannot be faked. They live in the small acts of kindness, the gentle words, the silent care we show to others. And as he looked at his mother smiling softly beside her flowers, he knew that losing someone who disrespected her was not a loss at all. It was a blessing in disguise. The days following the breakup were quiet but filled with reflection. The billionaire felt an emptiness at first, not because he missed his former fiancée, but because he was coming to terms with how wrong he had been about her. It was a strange feeling, realizing that someone he thought he knew so well had been wearing a mask all along. The truth had hurt, but it had also brought a kind of freedom. He no longer had to question his instincts or carry the weight of doubt. The truth, however painful, was finally clear. His mother remained as calm and gentle as ever. She never said a bad word about the young woman, though it was clear she was relieved that the situation had come to an end. She spent her mornings in the garden, tending to her plants, humming softly to herself. Her presence gave him peace. Watching her move slowly but gracefully reminded him of all the sacrifices she had made over the years. She had been his strength when he had nothing, and even now she continued to guide him with her quiet wisdom. One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sun go down, his mother spoke softly. She told him that sometimes life brings people into our path to teach us lessons, not to stay. She said that disappointment is not always a curse. Sometimes it's a form of protection. He listened carefully, realizing how right she was. The experience had opened his eyes to the difference between appearance and truth. It had reminded him of what truly mattered: respect, compassion, and sincerity. But the story didn't end there. A few weeks later, the fiancée tried to return. She showed up unannounced at his home one afternoon, dressed elegantly as always, her face a mixture of regret and determination. The staff at the gate were hesitant to let her in, but she insisted that she needed to speak with him one last time. When he was informed, he took a long pause before agreeing to meet her. Not out of curiosity, but to close the chapter completely. When she entered the room, she looked around, her eyes softening when they landed on him. She began speaking quickly, saying she had made mistakes, that she had been careless and let her emotions get the best of her. She said she missed him, that she couldn't imagine life without him. Her words flowed easily, rehearsed yet emotional. She spoke of wanting another chance, promising that things would be different this time. He listened silently. There was no anger in his expression, no bitterness, only calm understanding. When she finished, he asked her one simple question: if she truly respected his mother. The question seemed to catch her off guard. She hesitated, fumbling for the right words. Her eyes flickered, revealing uncertainty. That hesitation told him everything. She spoke about misunderstanding, about generational differences, trying to shift the blame away from her behavior. But he knew that respect was not something that could be explained away or negotiated. It either existed or it didn't. He told her softly that he wished her well, but he could not go back to what was broken. He said that forgiveness did not mean forgetting or ignoring what had happened. It simply meant choosing peace over pain. She grew emotional, pleading with him, saying that he was overreacting. She accused him of letting his mother control his decisions. Her voice grew sharper, revealing the same pride that had caused the downfall in the first place. He realized then that she had not changed at all. She was simply afraid of losing the comfort and status that came with being by his side. His mother entered the room quietly during this exchange. She had not planned to interrupt, but she sensed the tension. The fiancée froze when she saw her, her confident tone fading instantly. The older woman looked at her with calm eyes, not angry or bitter, just sad. She thanked her for coming, but gently told her that sometimes two people are not meant to walk the same path. Her voice carried both kindness and firmness, the kind that ends arguments without cruelty. The fiancée said nothing more. She left soon after, her steps heavy, her face pale. After she was gone, the house felt peaceful again. The billionaire sat in silence for a while, thinking about everything that had happened. His mother sat beside him, not saying much, just holding his hand. Sometimes silence speaks louder than any words. It was a silence that carried both closure and comfort. In the weeks that followed, he focused more on his work and his community. He began to invest time in charitable projects, helping elderly care homes and single mothers, people who reminded him of his own upbringing. He found joy in small acts of kindness, realizing that real happiness doesn't come from luxury or status, but from giving back and living with integrity. The experience with his fiancée had changed him deeply. It had humbled him, teaching him to look beyond appearances and listen to his instincts. People around him noticed the change. He seemed calmer, more grounded, more thoughtful. Friends who had once envied his glamorous relationship now admired his strength and the quiet dignity with which he had handled the heartbreak. When people asked him what had happened, he never spoke with anger or resentment. He simply said, "Life reveals truth when you least expect it." His words carried a wisdom that only comes from experience. One afternoon, he visited his mother's old neighborhood, the small area where he had grown up. The streets were narrow, the houses close together, but the memories they held were priceless. He met neighbors who still remembered him as a boy, running around barefoot, full of dreams. They welcomed him warmly, proud of what he had become. As he walked those familiar streets, he realized how far he had come, not just in wealth but in understanding. He spent time with the children there, talking to them about education, hard work, and kindness. He told them that no amount of money could replace respect, and that how they treated others would define who they became. The children listened eagerly, their eyes wide with admiration. He could see himself in them, hopeful, curious, and eager to learn. It reminded him that everyone starts from somewhere, and that true success is not about escaping one's roots but honoring them. Back home, his mother often watched him with quiet pride. She knew that her son had grown not just as a businessman but as a person. The pain he had gone through had refined him, making him more compassionate, more self-aware. Sometimes life's hardest moments are the ones that teach the most powerful lessons, and she knew he had learned his well. Months passed peacefully. Then one evening he received a letter from his former fiancée. It wasn't long, just a few lines. She wrote that she understood now what he had meant about respect and that she hoped he would find happiness. There was no plea for reconciliation, only a quiet acknowledgement of her mistakes. He read it, folded it carefully, and placed it in a drawer. There was no anger left in him, only acceptance. Some chapters he realized, and not with bitterness but with understanding. Over time, the painful memories faded, replaced by gratitude for the lessons learned. The billionaire continued to live with purpose and humility, surrounded by people who truly cared for him. He found comfort in simplicity, shared meals with his mother, long walks in the garden, evenings spent in reflection. The world still saw him as a man of great success, but those who knew him closely saw something deeper, a man who valued honesty, kindness, and family above all else. There were moments when he thought about the past, but never with regret. Every experience had shaped him, molded him into someone stronger and wiser. He knew that life would always have challenges, but he also knew that he had the strength to face them with grace. His mother's presence continued to be his guiding light, reminding him that love built on respect is the only kind that lasts. One night, as he sat in the garden with his mother, the stars spread across the sky like scattered diamonds. He reflected on everything that had happened. His mother smiled softly and said, "You see, my son, sometimes we must lose what isn't right for us to make room for what is." He nodded, feeling an immense sense of peace. The pain that had once clouded his heart was gone, replaced by gratitude and clarity. He realized that the confrontation that once filled him with sorrow had, in truth, been a blessing. It had revealed the truth, ended the pretense, and allowed him to rebuild his life on stronger ground. He had learned that love without respect is an illusion, and that true happiness comes from being surrounded by people who value kindness over pride. In the stillness of that night, as the wind rustled through the trees, he looked at his mother and smiled. She had always told him that everything happens for a reason, and now he understood. What had once felt like a painful ending had become the beginning of something far more meaningful. A life grounded in truth, guided by love and enriched by lessons only experience could teach. Months had passed since the storm had settled, and life for the billionaire had taken on a quieter, more meaningful rhythm. He had stopped chasing what glittered on the surface and started cherishing what truly mattered. His mansion, once filled with extravagant parties and endless guests, was now a place of peace. The laughter that echoed through its walls came not from social gatherings, but from genuine moments spent with people who cared for him without expecting anything in return. Every morning, he would join his mother for breakfast on the veranda. She loved to sit by the window where the sunlight streamed in, touching her silver hair. She often spoke about simple things, the new flowers blooming in the garden, the children she saw playing outside during her walks, or an old memory from their earlier days. He listened to her, smiling, realizing that happiness was not complicated. It was right there in the warmth of shared silence and the comfort of familiar faces. In his work, he had found new purpose. He started funding a foundation dedicated to helping elderly people who had no one to look after them. It was his way of honoring his mother's values and giving back to the world. He visited homes, met the people his foundation supported, and listened to their stories. Some had once been teachers, some farmers, some artists, but all shared a longing for kindness and company. His visits always brightened their days, and he left each time feeling richer in ways money could never measure. One particular woman reminded him of his mother. She was in her 80s with soft eyes and a kind smile. She told him about her life, how she had raised her children alone after her husband passed away, how she had worked tirelessly to give them an education. Now she lived alone, her children scattered across cities too busy to visit. Her story touched him deeply. He made sure her home was well cared for and visited her often, bringing her flowers from his garden. Over time, their bond grew, and he began to see her as another grandmother figure. She often said he reminded her of her late son, and that made him feel both humble and grateful. At home, his mother noticed how much he had changed. The restlessness that had once defined him was gone. There was a calm in him, a peace that came from living truthfully. He had learned that forgiveness didn't always mean reconnection. It meant freeing oneself from bitterness. The anger he once carried toward his ex-fiancée had long faded. In its place was understanding. He hoped she too had found her path and learned from what had happened. One evening, as he walked through his garden, he came across an old photograph tucked into a book he hadn't opened in years. It was of him and his mother from long ago, standing outside their old house. They both looked so different, he younger and uncertain, she strong and protective. The image brought tears to his eyes, not of sadness but gratitude. He realized that everything he had become was because of her unwavering love and faith. Without her, he would have been lost long ago. He decided to surprise her. Over the next few weeks, he secretly began restoring their old family home in the small town they had once lived in. It was in need of care. Walls cracked, roof faded. But he poured his heart into the project. He wanted to bring back those memories, not as a reminder of struggle, but as a celebration of how far they had come. When it was finally ready, he took her there one morning without telling her where they were going. As the car drove through the familiar streets, her eyes lit up. When they stopped in front of the house, tears filled her eyes. The place looked almost the same as it had decades ago, only brighter, warmer. The garden had been revived, the walls freshly painted, and every detail carried traces of love. She stepped out slowly, her hands trembling, and turned to look at her son. He smiled softly and said, "I thought we could come back to where it all began." She embraced him tightly, unable to speak. They walked through the rooms, each corner holding a memory. She paused by the window where she used to sit and sew, the same spot where she had once dreamt of a better life for her son. Now that dream stood beside her, real and fulfilled. It was one of the most emotional days of their lives. The simplicity of that moment meant more than all the riches in the world. From then on, they spent weekends there. The house became their escape, a place where they could return to their roots and reconnect with what truly mattered. The neighbors welcomed them warmly, and soon it became a small community of kindness again. He sponsored local schools, helped rebuild the small clinic, and supported local businesses. He wanted the town to flourish, not just because it was his past, but because it was home. One afternoon, while sitting outside under the shade of an old tree, his mother said something that stayed with him forever. She said, "True wealth isn't in what you have, my son. It's in what you give and how you treat those who can give you nothing in return." Her words settled deep in his heart. He knew she was right. Everything he had now, the peace, the love, the respect, came not from his fortune but from his choices. He continued to live by those words. He treated everyone with the same respect, whether they were employees, friends, or strangers. People often said he was different from most rich men, and perhaps he was. His experiences had taught him humility. The way his ex-fiancée had mocked his mother had once filled him with pain. But now he saw it as the moment that changed his life for the better. It had forced him to look deeper into what kind of person he wanted beside him, and what kind of man he wanted to be. As time went on, new opportunities came his way. He met people who shared his values and vision. Among them was a woman who worked as a doctor in one of the clinics he supported. She was kind, humble, and carried the same compassion that his mother did. Their conversations flowed easily, filled with laughter and understanding. He admired how she spoke about her patients with empathy rather than judgment. There was something real about her, something grounded. Their friendship grew slowly and naturally. She never treated him like a billionaire, and he never saw her as someone impressed by wealth. They connected on a human level, through shared values and mutual respect. His mother met her too, and she instantly liked her. There was a warmth between them that reminded her of herself when she was younger. For the first time in a long while, she saw her son truly happy again. Months later, when he decided to take their relationship further, he did it differently this time. There were no grand gestures, no headlines, no expensive gifts. Instead, he invited her and his mother to the small family home and asked the question simply, surrounded by love and peace. She said yes, and his mother's eyes filled with joy. It was a quiet, beautiful moment, one that felt right in every way. The wedding that followed was small, attended only by close friends and family. There were no reporters, no flashy celebrations. It was held in the garden of their restored home, under the same old tree where his mother had once shared her wisdom. As he exchanged vows, he felt a deep sense of gratitude, not only for finding love again, but for the journey that had led him there. Every pain, every lesson, every disappointment had guided him toward this peace. His mother watched with tears of pride and joy. She had seen her son grow from a boy with dreams to a man who had everything, and yet chose simplicity, kindness, and love above all. When he looked at her after the ceremony, she nodded gently as if to say, "You did well." As the years went on, life remained peaceful. He continued his work with the foundation, often joined by his wife. Together, they built programs for the elderly, provided education to underprivileged children, and created shelters for those in need. The mansion was no longer just a symbol of wealth. It was a place of purpose. His story became known not because of his riches, but because of his heart. People admired how he had turned pain into compassion, how he had used his success to lift others. Whenever anyone asked how he found peace after such betrayal, he always smiled and said, "Life tested me to remind me what truly matters." Years later, when his mother passed away peacefully in her sleep, it was a bittersweet moment. She had lived a long, fulfilled life surrounded by love. Her son honored her memory by continuing her mission of kindness. He named a new elderly care center after her, calling it The Haven, a place where no elderly person would ever feel unwanted again. Standing before the opening ceremony, he looked up at the sky and whispered a silent thank you for the lessons, for the love, for the second chances. His mother's words echoed in his mind. True wealth is in how you treat others. And he knew that as long as he lived by that truth, he would always be rich in the ways that mattered most. The story that began with pain had ended with peace. What had once been a moment of heartbreak became the turning point of a lifetime. In losing something false, he had gained everything real. And as he walked through the halls of the Haven, surrounded by smiles and laughter, he understood. Sometimes life takes away what you want to give you what you need.